Welcome back to the Cannes 2023 Parallel Challenge here on Fantasy Film Ball. We are your hosts, Matt and Arnaud.
And so that means we are watching an equivalent film to all 21 titles in Cannes this year. So in this video, we'll be talking about Fists in the Pocket and Kidnapped, directed by Marco Bellocchio. So Bellocchio is currently 86 years old. He is the second oldest director in competition this year behind Ken Loach. So he's been around for a while. By a while, I mean he's like half a generation younger than like the big Italian directors of the 60s and 70s like Rossellini, Fellini, and De Sica. He's often been on the fringes of Italian cinema. He never really conformed to the neorealism of the time, and his career really started to have a bit of a late rebirth of sorts, or at least like a kind of a Spike Lee thing going on where we're just like kind of rediscovering his films even though he's much older now. This kind of started in 2009 with Vincere, where he explores the rise of Mussolini. But since 2019, he's had one film selected in the Cannes selection every edition of the festival, including this year. So Cannes really likes this guy, even if he's not like the premier Italian director we think of when we think of great Italian filmmakers. And so Fists in the Pocket, the film we'll be talking about, is his first film. We broke our own rules here because this was a unique opportunity to have a film from the 60s in our lineup, and it's often seen as one of his best films even after all these years, and he's done it when he was in his 20s.
There's an opportunity here to talk about this really interesting maverick of a filmmaker in the 60s who is now 86 years old and still churning out films. It's rumored that his current film in competition might be his last. Also symbolic to watch a first film and a last film. And this film was very controversial at the time of release. Actually, Bellocchio's idols, Louis Buñuel and Michelangelo Antonioni, both said that this film was disgusting and reprehensible. So Fists in the Pocket follows the story of a dysfunctional Italian family of 4 children along with their ailing blind mother. 3 of the 4 children here have severe epilepsy, and Augusto, the eldest in the family, he does not have epilepsy. Alessandro, one of the other siblings, he really loves his older brother, Augusto, and he worries that Augusto is going to waste his life caring for his siblings and mother. So Alessandro hatches a plan to kill himself, his mother, and his siblings to leave Augusto unburdened with the trials and tribulations of this family. So it's sort of a twisted, dark comedy. Feels very edgy for the 1960s, for sure.
Dark comedy even might be a bit of a stretch. There's definitely some funny moments, I guess, but like it's a pretty heavy film. It takes maybe a little while to get into it, at least from my experience. But once the ball gets rolling, it's really, really fascinating. I think Bellocchio through this film really shows his fascination for the Italian family unit. The lead character that we're following is in some way a social recluse and is just kind of like mad at the world and his upbringing and kind of the society around him. To me, like this kind of feels like the kind of character and the kind of film that Italian people in the 60s would say this is their Joker, even though Joker didn't exist yet. A lot of this is also due to a very strong, at least to me, very strong lead performance by Lou Castel. There's definitely a Marlon Brando-esque kind of coolness to his look, and he's much more strangely erratic in moments than you would expect. His vibe is there's really something eerie and strange going on in him. You just can't stop looking at him. He really commands the screen. You really get the sense that he's a really fully fleshed out character through his performance, and you're just wondering what kind of character, what kind of person he'll become. Is this a serial killer film? This is a film, if anything, it just makes me even more fascinated to dive more into Bellocchio's work. I think that he's somebody who is telling stories that aren't necessarily formally inventive or experimental. He definitely is interested in certain given themes. To me, he really seems like the kind of director where you'll get more out of him the more films you see from him. And I know that's the case with a lot of directors, but him especially.
This is a very strong performance from Lou Castel, especially when you think he did not speak Italian at the time of performing this. He was actually dubbed over by someone else, and yet the performance is so physically strong that it really speaks for itself. It's erratic, it's animalistic. You don't know what's going on in his mind or if he could snap at any moment. But like you said, this takes way too long to get started. It was 30 minutes in. I checked the time and I went, what's this about? What is this movie? I still don't know, and it's 30 minutes in. And then very shortly after that, it revealed itself and I understood what was going on. But up to that point, I was wondering if I'd missed something. But yeah, it's stylistically interesting in a way that I think a lot of Italian films in the 1960s were. It's not one that I think I'm going to go back to as many times as some of my favorite Fellini films, but it was quite interesting. And it's got a very good score by Ennio Morricone.
That's true. That's true. I completely forgot. Yeah, the music is terrific, as you would expect from a Morricone score. Morricone, I guess, in his early career at that point. Let's talk about his new film called Kidnapped. It is a historical film that takes place in 19th century Italy, where a young Jewish boy is kidnapped to be raised Christian, creating, as you might expect, a massive political conflict. I don't know the entire historical context to this particular story, so that's kind of what I gleaned from the plot summary. Definitely some parallels to some political things, I guess, even today. You know, that feels very in line with Bellocchio, who not only loves period pieces, as we've seen with some of his previous films like The Traitor and Vincere, but also loves to critique power structures in a way that resonates with today's politics. So as far as Bellocchio's films that were selected in Cannes competition, only one of them have won awards, which is a film that dates from 1980. Since then, Bellocchio has not won anything despite being selected 7 more times, which means that his track record as far as like win to not win ratio is not great. This is his swan song, at least it is said to be his swan song. So if the jury are aware of that and respect Bellocchio as a filmmaker, maybe they'll be a little bit more biased to giving him a prize. Maybe they'll create a prize the way they created a prize for the Dardennes in order to give him a prize, the special 76th anniversary prize. You never know. Maybe that can happen. Unless something like that happens, I wouldn't bet on this film getting an award.
I agree with you. This just doesn't feel like it's going to be cutting edge enough for an award, although the story sounds really interesting. Steven Spielberg was actually going to make this exact story into a film. It was supposed to be his film before West Side Story, and then he chose to do West Side Story instead. Mark Rylance, I think, was going to play one of the lead roles. Bellocchio, he's just not on the same level as the Dardenne brothers, who just will breathe and get awarded a Cannes prize. So no matter how good this is, I just don't see Bellocchio getting it. And it's really interesting that we have picked a film so early in his career, because while it's really fascinating to see what type of filmmaker he was at the start, he has had 60 years to evolve into an entirely different human being, an entirely different filmmaker. I don't feel like I know much more about the current Marco Bellocchio than I did before. That's the one downside to choosing this film as our parallel selection, because yeah, the filmmaker making Kidnapped is not the one that made Fists in the Pocket. Thank you so much for joining us on our Cannes Parallel Challenge. Make sure you subscribe so that you can continue following us on our journey to discover who our Palme d'Or is going to be this year. Thanks for watching. See you next time.